The air in Las Vegas in 1970 hummed with a special kind of electricity. It wasn't just the neon lights buzzing or the clink of coins spilling from slot machines. It was the feeling that anything could happen, that dreams were made and lost on the roll of a dice. And at the heart of it all, drawing people from every corner of the globe, stood the International Hotel, a gleaming monument to entertainment. Inside its grand showroom, the biggest star in the world, Elvis Presley, held court. My name is Leo. And back then, I was just a kid fresh out of high school, working as a busboy in the International's main restaurant. But my real dream wasn't pouring coffee. It was just to be close to the magic, to the king himself. Every night after my shift, if I was lucky, I'd sneak into the back of the showroom just to catch a glimpse, to feel the roar of the crowd. Elvis wasn't just a singer, he was a force of nature. When he walked onto that stage, the entire room would gasp. He wore those incredible jumpsuits sparkling under the lights, making him look like something from another planet. But what really got you was his voice, smooth as velvet one moment, powerful as a thunderclap the next. He sang every note with his whole heart, and you could feel it right down to your bones. People screamed, they cried, they threw flowers and scarves. It was pure joy, pure adoration. One night, while clearing tables near the entrance of the showroom, I noticed a new kind of energy in the usual VIP crowd. A man stood out even amongst the high rollers in their custom suits and flashing jewelry. He wasn't just rich, he practically dripped money. His name, I soon learned, was Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling was a tall man, impeccably dressed, in a suit that probably cost more than my family's house. He had a perfectly coiffed silver mane, and a smile that seemed permanently plastered on more of a smirk. Really. He wore a diamond pinky ring that glittered like a small galaxy, and a gold watch that looked heavy enough to weigh down a small boat. He moved with an air of absolute confidence, like he owned the entire hotel, maybe even the whole city. He wasn't subtle. Before Elvis even came on stage, Mr. Sterling was already making his presence known. He'd loudly order the most expensive champagne, tipping the server with a wad of bills that would make your jaw drop. He'd laugh a little too loudly, his voice cutting through the pre-show buzz. And he always had the best table right up front, center stage. From my busboy vantage point, I saw him every night. He was in town usually for a week or two at a time. He wasn't just there to enjoy the show, he was there to be seen. He wanted everyone to know he was Mr. Sterling, the man with unlimited funds, the man who could buy anything. And sometimes it felt like he wanted to buy the spotlight itself. The first time I saw him really try to draw attention, Elvis was mid-song performing Suspicious Minds. The energy was electric, the crowd on their feet. Suddenly, from the front row, a loud, almost triumphant cheer erupted. It was Mr. Sterling. He wasn't just cheering, he was literally throwing a handful of $100 bills onto the stage. They fluttered down like green snowflakes, landing near Elvis's feet. The band paused for a split second. A flicker of surprise on their faces. Elvis, however, didn't miss a beat. He smoothly sidestepped the falling money, his eyes still locked on the audience, his smile unwavering. He just kept singing, his voice as powerful as ever, as if a sudden shower of cash was an everyday occurrence. The applause swelled, drowning out any lingering sounds of the money hitting the stage. The audience, loyal and wrapped up in the magic, barely registered the disruption. They were there for Elvis, and nothing, not even a rain of cash, was going to break that spell. But I saw it. I saw Mr. Sterling's face, a slight smirk playing on his lips as if he had pulled off some grand trick. And I saw the way Elvis's eyes, even as he smiled and sang, briefly flickered towards the bills, a tiny, almost imperceptible shift that only someone watching closely would notice. It wasn't anger, it was something else, something deeper, a quiet understanding. That night, as I walked home through the glittering Vegas streets, the image of those green bills scattering on the stage stayed with me. Mr. Sterling thought he had made a statement, but Elvis the King hadn't even flinched. It was a small moment, but it felt like the opening act of something much bigger. I had a feeling Mr. Sterling wasn't done trying to steal the show, and I wondered what Elvis would do next. The incident with the money on stage became a topic of quiet conversation among the staff. We'd seen wealthy patrons before, of course, but Mr. Sterling was different. He didn't just spend money, he flaunted it. He seemed to want his presence to be as loud as Elvis's performance. Over the next few nights, Mr. Sterling's attempts to grab attention became more defined, more like deliberate jabs. He always had the best table, front and center, practically under Elvis's nose. And he didn't just sit there, he performed his own little show. During one slower, more emotional song, Elvis was holding a note, his eyes closed, truly lost in the music. It was a sacred moment for the audience. Everyone hushed, captivated. That's when Mr. Sterling pulled out a solid gold cigarette case, snapped it open with a loud click, and lit a cigarette with an equally ostentatious gold lighter. The sudden flick of the flame, the puff of smoke, it was just enough to pull a few eyes from the stage just for a moment. He'd then take a long, slow drag, exhaling with a theatrical sigh, as if he was the one deeply moved by the music, needing a moment to compose himself. Elvis again didn't outwardly react. He finished the song beautifully, the applause swelling like a tide, but I noticed his gaze linger for an extra second on Mr. Sterling's table as he moved to the next number. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there, like a hawk spotting a tiny movement in the grass. Another night, Mr. Sterling arrived late, making a grand entrance just as Elvis was about to sing his first song. He wasn't just late, he was fashionably late, his arrival heralded by the clinking of ice in his glass and the distinct rustle of his expensive suit as he squeezed past people to his seat. He'd make sure to greet everyone loudly on his way, shaking hands, kissing cheeks, all while the house lights were already dimming and the crowd was hushed, waiting for the king. Elvis would be on stage, microphone in hand, ready to begin. He'd see Mr. Sterling making his way, drawing eyes away from the stage. Without missing a beat, Elvis would simply lift his hand, palm out to the band, signaling a brief pause. He'd wait patiently, a slight enigmatic smile on his lips, until Mr. Sterling was finally settled in his seat. Only then would he give the nod and the music would begin. It wasn't a scolding. It was just a quiet, powerful assertion of control. He wasn't acknowledging Sterling's rudeness. He was simply waiting for the show to begin properly, on his terms. And the audience, understanding the unspoken message, would clap louder their loyalty to Elvis. Strengthening with each passing show, I started to understand something important about Elvis. He wasn't just a performer, he was a master of presence. He didn't need to shout to be heard, or react wildly to be seen. His power came from his stillness, his quiet strength. He was like a deep river. Mr. Sterling was a noisy stream trying to draw attention to itself. My shifts kept me close to the showroom entrance, and I often heard Mr. Sterling talking to people before the show. He'd drop casual hints about his latest business deals. How many euros were in his bank account, the private jet he'd flown in on. He spoke in a booming voice, making sure anyone within earshot could hear him. "This King Presley, he's good, I heard him say one night to a group of his equally flashy friends. But honestly, the show lacks a certain je ne sais quoi, needs more sparkle, more dynamism, maybe a little less of the sentimental stuff, and more of the razzle-dazzle." His friends would nod, chuckling nervously. They knew what he meant. He thought Elvis needed more flash, more overt displays of wealth and grandeur, like Mr. Sterling himself represented. It was clear he saw Elvis through the lens of money. He believed everything had a price, and if it didn't, it simply wasn't important. I felt a surge of protectiveness for Elvis. He gave so much of himself to those shows, pouring his heart out night after night. To hear someone so casually dismiss it, to judge it based on a shallow standard of sparkle, felt wrong. Colonel Parker, Elvis's manager, was a shrewd man always observing from the wings. I saw him watching Mr. Sterling one night, his usually poker face set in a grim line. He was too smart not to notice the high roller's antics. "That fellow," the colonel grumbled to a security guard loud enough for me to overhear. "He thinks he's the show, needs to remember who pays for these lights." But Elvis, through it all, remained serene. He'd sign autographs after the show, talking to fans, genuinely connecting with them. He wasn't bothered by the money or the flashing lights. He was bothered by anything that got in the way of his connection with his audience. I knew Mr. Sterling was going to try something bigger. His jabs were getting bolder, his ego growing. But I also knew Elvis was watching, taking it all in, waiting, and I had a feeling that when the time came, the king would have a quiet, powerful answer. Quiet jabs Mr. Sterling had been delivering slowly escalated into more overt provocations. He wasn't content with just interrupting. He wanted to dominate the narrative, to prove that his wealth could outshine even the king's magnetism. One evening before Elvis was due on stage, an enormous floral arrangement arrived packaged. It wasn't just big, it was monstrous. It barely fit through the door. A towering pyramid of exotic orchids and roses, glittering with embedded strands of tiny LED lights. A card ostentatiously large and gilded was attached. It read, "To the king from the true king of capital, enjoy the view." The delivery men struggled with it, knocking over a costume rack in the process. Priscilla, Elvis's wife, who was backstage helping him get ready, looked at it with a mix of amusement and annoyance. Colonel Parker practically spat. Another one of his stunts, the colonel muttered, his face red. What's he trying to prove, that he can buy every flower in Vegas? Elvis, who was getting his hair styled, simply looked at the monstrosity in the corner. He didn't laugh, didn't seem angry, just a slow, thoughtful nod. "Well," he drawled, his voice calm, "it certainly is bright." He didn't send it back, nor did he display it prominently. It just sat there in the way, a silent testament to Mr. Sterling's desire for attention. It was ignored, much to the colonel's irritation, who felt it was a direct challenge. Next, Mr. Sterling started sending more personal gifts, not to Elvis himself, but to the band and crew. Custom-made watches, expensive bottles of liquor, even brand-new luxury cars for key members of the orchestra, all delivered with a flourish, always with a card that hinted at Mr. Sterling's generosity and implied a certain... It was as if he was trying to buy their loyalty, to suggest that he was the one who truly valued them more than their own boss. One of the guitarists, a gruff but loyal man named James, came in with a brand-new gleaming sports car. He looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Sterling," he insisted. James explained to the rest of the band, shaking his head. Said it was a token of appreciation for our contribution to the Vegas landscape. Said he wanted us to know what real appreciation looked like. The other musicians exchanged uneasy glances. They were proud of their work with Elvis, and this felt like a cheapening of their art. They knew Elvis took care of them in his own way, with genuine respect and friendship, not with flashy impersonal gifts. When Elvis heard about the car, he just raised an eyebrow. "Well, James," he said, a faint smile touching his lips, "it's a nice car. Just make sure you drive it safe, and remember who you're really playing for." It was a subtle warning, a reminder of where their true allegiance lay. No anger, no accusations, just a quiet, firm statement. Mr. Sterling's audacity peaked during a special charity event. Elvis was hosting. Elvis often used his fame for good, raising money for hospitals and children's charities. This particular night, he was going to auction off a custom-made guitar and a signed jumpsuit. Just as the auction was about to begin, Mr. Sterling, who had clearly known about the event, dramatically stood up from his front row table. He held up a hand, silencing the auctioneer. Hold on," he boomed, his voice echoing through the showroom. "I understand we're here for a noble cause, and I applaud Mr. Presley's efforts." Paused, looking around at the crowd, letting the anticipation build. "But frankly, these items are a bit modest for the scale of generosity I envisions. Therefore I, Mr. Sterling, will personally match every single dollar." A gasp went through the crowd. A gasp went through the crowd. $5 million. It was an astronomical sum back then. People were stunned. Mr. Sterling stood there, basking in the applause, looking triumphant. He had effectively stolen the thunder, making his donation the headline, overshadowing Elvis's own efforts. Colonel Parker was practically vibrating with rage. "Baked. He's making a mockery of it," he hissed. He's turning a charity event into his own personal billboard. Elvis, however, just walked onto the stage, a soft, unreadable expression on his face. He picked up the microphone. "Well now," he drawled, his voice smooth and calming. "That's certainly a generous offer, Mr. Sterling, and we thank you for your support of such a worthy cause." He then turned to the audience, his eyes twinkling. "But let's remember, folks, it ain't about the size of the check. It's about the size of the heart that writes it, and the spirit that brings us all together for good." He then proceeded with the auction, making jokes, charming the audience, encouraging people to bid what they could. He never once mentioned Mr. Sterling's grand gesture again. He simply brought the focus back to the reason they were there, the community, the kindness. Mr. Sterling's face, which had been beaming moments before, tightened imperceptibly. He probably expected a more direct acknowledgement, a fawning "thank you," or perhaps for Elvis to look overwhelmed by his magnanimity. Instead, Elvis had turned his grand, showy gesture into a simple background detail and refocused on the genuine spirit of giving. That night, as I cleaned up after the event, I saw Elvis talking quietly with one of the charity organizers, genuinely interested in how the funds would be used. He looked tired, but satisfied. He wasn't seeking applause for his charity work. He was seeking results. Mr. Sterling's escalation was clear. He was trying to buy the spotlight, buy loyalty, even buy moral high ground, but Elvis wasn't playing that game. He was letting Mr. Sterling dig his own hole, quietly observing, and gently, almost invisibly, reminding everyone what truly mattered. The stage was being set for a much larger unspoken battle. Mr. Sterling's frustration was palpable. His grand gestures, his attempts to outspend and outshine Elvis weren't landing the way he expected. He was used to money, opening every door, buying every applause. But with Elvis, it was different. Elvis wasn't impressed by his diamonds or his millions. He didn't react with anger or envy, just quiet reduction. It was maddening for a man like Sterling who thrived on control and recognition. So he decided to up the ante, to issue a challenge so public and so grand that it couldn't be ignored. He wasn't just going to try and overshadow Elvis's shows. He was going to try and overshadow Elvis's entire presence in Las Vegas. The rumors started swirling through the International Hotel like wildfire. Mr. Sterling, it was whispered, had bought out the entire top floor of the hotel, the most luxurious suites, the penthouse where Elvis himself often stayed when he was performing. Not just for a night, but for the entire duration of Elvis's current residency. He was planning to throw a series of private, exclusive parties, a rival social scene designed to draw away the city's most influential and wealthy, those who usually flocked to Elvis's after-show gatherings. Then came the official announcement plastered on billboards all over Vegas, even bought as full-page ads in the local newspapers. An evening of unparalleled opulence, hosted by Mr. Prescott Sterling. The ad showed a shimmering image of champagne towers, tuxedo-clad guests, and cascades of pearls. It was explicitly timed for the night of Elvis's biggest show of the week, the Saturday night performance, usually a sold-out star-studded affair. The unspoken message was clear. While Elvis was performing for the masses, Mr. Sterling was entertaining the elite. He was trying to draw a line suggesting that Elvis's popularity was for the common folk. While he represented true power and sophistication, he thinks he can split the city, Colonel Parker thundered, pacing Elvis's dressing room like a caged tiger. He thinks he can show the high rollers they don't need the king. It's an insult, Elvis, a direct challenge. Elvis was sitting quietly polishing his guitar, seemingly unfazed. He listened to the Colonel's rant, his expression thoughtful. "Well, Colonel," he finally said, his voice calm, "I reckon those who truly want to be at my show will be there. And those who want to go to a fancy party, well, bless their hearts, they'll be there too." But the perception, Elvis Parker insisted. "He's trying to make you look common. He's trying to diminish your standing." Elvis just smiled faintly. "Son," I started, "common. Ain't nothing wrong with that. My fans, they're common folk, and I love 'em for it." Despite his outward calm, I could sense the shift in the air bext. The musicians were uneasy. The dancers were whispering. Even the security guards seemed a little more tense. Everyone wondered how Elvis would respond to this direct public affront. Would he lash out? Would he ignore it? Would he for once engage in Mr. Sterling's game? One afternoon, I was delivering a tray of snacks to Elvis's dressing room. A rare privilege. He was alone, staring out the window at the bustling Vegas Strip. He looked tired but not defeated, more contemplative. "Leo," he said, turning, surprising me. He remembered my name. "Tell me, what do folks out there, the regular folks, think of all this Mr. Sterling business?" I hesitated, wanting to choose my words carefully. "Well, Mr. Presley," I began, "most people just think he's trying too hard. They come here for you. They don't care about his parties or his money." Elvis nodded slowly. "And you, son," gathering my courage. "I think he's trying to buy something that isn't for sale, sir. Something like heart." A genuine smile, soft and warm, touched Elvis's lips. "Heart," he repeated, a faraway look in his eyes. That's about right. Leo can't put a price tag on that, can you?" He paused, then turned back to the window. "You know, Leo, a man can spend all the money in the world trying to build himself up, but if it ain't built on something real, it just crumbles. And what's real and you share when you're all together, truly connected." He picked up his guitar again, strumming a few soft chords. "He wants to make a spectacle, wants to make noise. Well, sometimes the quietest things are the loudest, aren't they?" I didn't fully understand what he meant then, but a shiver went down my spine. It wasn't a threat, not a promise of anger. It was something else. Entirely. It was a hint of the kind of comeback only Elvis could deliver. A comeback not of money or of flash, but of something far more profound. The king was thinking. And when Elvis Presley thought, magic usually happened. The week leading up to Mr. Sterling's grand party and Elvis's Saturday night show was thick with tension bext. Colonel Parker was a wreck. He was fielding calls from journalists, from hotel management, even from other high rollers who were torn between attending Sterling's exclusive bash and Elvis's iconic performance. Parker fumed his cigar smoke, clouding Elvis's dressing room. "He's trying to steal your thunder, Elvis. We should issue a statement. Tell him off. Remind him who the king of Vegas truly is." Elvis, however, remained remarkably calm. He'd sit in his chair, quietly observing, sometimes listening to the colonel, sometimes just staring into space. He'd ask questions, not about Mr. Sterling's wealth, but about the guest list for his party, the kind of entertainment he was planning. He was gathering information like a general studying the enemy's movements. "Relax, Colonel," Elvis would say, his voice a low drawl. "A man can make all the noise he wants, but if folks ain't listening, it's just echoes." But inside, I knew he was feeling the pressure. I saw the way he'd run his hand over his face after a particularly long meeting, the faint lines of worry around his eyes. He wasn't afraid of the challenge, but he was protective of his legacy, of the bond he shared with his fans. He understood that this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the spirit of Vegas, about what it truly meant to be a star who commanded genuine devotion, not just purchased admiration. He spent more time than usual with his band members, not just rehearsing, but talking, laughing, sharing stories. He'd emphasize the feeling of the music, the way each note connected to the heart. "Boys," he'd say, looking at each of them, "we ain't just playing songs out there. We're telling stories. We're sharing a piece of ourselves. Every strum, every beat, it's got to come from a place of truth, because folks, they can feel that they know when it's real." He seemed to be reminding them, and himself, of the core of what they did. It wasn't about the glitter or the fame. It was about the pure, raw emotion of the music. One afternoon, I was tidying up the green room when Elvis came in, holding a worn-out copy of a gospel hymn book. He sat down on the old couch, flipping through the pages. "Leo," he said without looking up, "what makes a show truly special to you?" I was surprised by the direct question. Well, Mr. Presley, I stammered. I guess it's when you can feel the person on stage really means it, when they're not just performing, but they're feeling it too. Like when you sing Can't Help Falling in Love and everyone just gets quiet and you can practically hear people's hearts melting. Yeah, he murmured. That's a good way to put it, melting hearts. That's what it's all about, ain't it? Not just getting him to clap, but to feel. He paused, then looked up at me. Mr. Sterling, he thinks the show is about how much you spend, how grand you can be. He thinks flash and sparkle are everything. What do you think about that? I thought about the times I'd seen Mr. Sterling trying to buy attention, his forced smiles, his loud announcements. I think, I said slowly, that real sparkle comes from inside, like from your smile, or the way you connect with the audience. Not from diamonds or big parties, Elvis chuckled, a soft, warm sound. You're a wise young man, Leo. You got a good head on your shoulders. He leaned back, his eyes still thoughtful. Sometimes, the biggest statements ain't made with the loudest voice, are they? Sometimes it's the quiet truth that cuts through all the noise. His words echoed in my mind. He wasn't talking about a confrontation with Sterling. He was talking about something deeper, something that transcended money and superficiality. The night before the big Saturday show, I saw Elvis sitting alone on the stage, the showroom empty and dark except for a single spotlight on him. He wasn't rehearsing. He was just sitting there, his guitar across his lap, sometimes strumming a chord, sometimes just looking out at the rows of empty seats. It was like he was having a conversation with the room, with the ghosts of all the audiences that had sat there with the spirit of the music itself. He seemed to be searching for something, a way to express the truth of his art, his connection, in a way that Mr. Sterling's money could never touch. He wasn't trying to beat Sterling at his own game. He was playing a different game entirely, one where the rules were written not in dollars but in heartbeats. I knew then, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that Elvis wasn't going to let Mr. Sterling win. He wouldn't stoop to his level. Instead, he would elevate the game, remind everyone what true stardom, true connection truly meant. The king was about to make his move, and it wouldn't be with fireworks or grand announcements. It would be with something far more profound. The highly anticipated Saturday night arrived, and with it Mr. Sterling's grand gesture. It wasn't just a party, he had truly pulled out all the stops. His ads had promised unparalleled opulence, and he delivered. Earlier in the day, the news channels in Las Vegas had been buzzing, not just about Elvis's sold-out show, but about Mr. Sterling's unprecedented philanthropic endeavor. He had announced with great fanfare a massive donation to a local art museum, contingent on the museum naming a new wing after him. Press conference had been held with a red carpet. Celebrity guest Sterling had flown in, and a giant replica of the check, complete with far too many zeros. He had even managed to get a giant banner unfurled across the side of a rival hotel, not the International, proclaiming Mr. Prescott Sterling, investing in Las Vegas culture. It was audacious, tacky, and undeniably attention-grabbing. He wanted to be the story, to show that his money could command headlines more effectively than a mere concert. The general sentiment in the city was a mix of awe at the sheer scale of the money and a cynical eye roll at the obvious self-promotion. Some were impressed, certainly. Others just saw it for what it was, a man trying to buy his way into history. That evening, the atmosphere at the International Hotel was electric. Despite Sterling's attempts to siphon off the high rollers, the showroom was, as always, packed to the rafters. Everyone wanted to see Elvis, but they also wondered silently how he would respond to Sterling's latest, most public challenge. Would he acknowledge it? Would he look diminished? Mr. Sterling himself was, of course, in his usual front row seat, dressed in a custom-made tuxedo that probably had solid gold buttons. He looked smug, confident that he had won the day's media battle. He kept glancing around as if expecting people to congratulate him, to acknowledge his victory. The house lights dimmed and the roar of the crowd began. The band started the famous 2001, A Space Odyssey theme. And then there he was, Elvis Presley. He emerged from the wings, bathed in the spotlight, looking regal and powerful in a pristine white jumpsuit, sparkling with thousands of sequins. Crowd erupted, a deafening wave of screams and applause. It was pure, unadulterated adoration, the kind money could never buy. He started the show with his usual energy, moving across the stage, throwing out scarves, connecting with the audience, as only he could. He sang "C.C. Rider" and "I Got a Woman" with all the fire and passion that had made him a legend. The crowd swayed, clapped, and sang along. The sheer joy in the room was palpable. The song started slow, bluesy, full of longing. Elvis sang it with a raw vulnerability that hushed the entire room. You could feel every word, every note. It wasn't just a song. It was a feeling. I watched Mr. Sterling in the front row. He was trying to maintain his smug composure, but as Elvis poured his soul into the lyrics, the high roller's expression began to shift. He probably expected a flashy, defiant performance from Elvis tonight, something that acknowledged his challenge. Instead, Elvis was giving them something deeply personal, deeply human. Contrast between Sterling's cold, calculated display of wealth and Elvis's heartfelt, passionate performance was stark. Sterling's Grand Museum donation, designed to buy headlines, felt hollow next to the genuine connection Elvis forged with thousands of people every single night. His charity was transactional. Elvis's performance was transformation. During "Love Me Tender," Elvis looked out at the audience, his eyes sweeping over the faces, lingering on a few. He held a moment, just breathing the soft music playing behind him. He wasn't looking at Mr. Sterling, he was looking at the ordinary people, the fans who had saved their money, traveled miles just to see him. He was giving them everything. His voice was pure, his movements graceful, and his eyes conveyed a sincerity that transcended the glitter of his jumpsuit. It was clear he was not performing for Mr. Sterling or against him. He was performing for the people who loved him, for the music, for the pure joy of it. Mr. Sterling, sitting there surrounded by his self-importance, must have felt it. He was a man of numbers of tangible assets. But Elvis was dealing in intangibles. Emotion, connection, raw human feeling. You couldn't buy that with a $5 million check. You couldn't name a wing after it. You had to earn it moment by moment with your heart and soul. As Elvis finished the song, the applause wasn't just loud, it was deeply felt. It was a reaffirmation of his place, of his power, of the unbreakable bond he shared with his audience. Mr. Sterling's grand gesture, the one he had tried to make the highlight of the day, now seemed like a distant, almost forgotten memory, drowned out by the thunder of true artistry. Elvis always said he listened to his fans. He often walked among them before and after shows, soaking in their energy, their stories, their hopes. He knew they didn't care about flashy stunts or big spending. They cared about the music, about the man, about the shared experience. After that Saturday night, the one where Mr. Sterling's grand gesture had fallen flat, Elvis became even quieter. He wasn't brooding, just thinking. He'd spend hours in his dressing room, often just playing his acoustic guitar, trying out new chords, humming melodies. He wasn't planning a direct counterattack. He was planning something deeper, something that would hit Mr. Sterling where it truly mattered, not in his wallet, but in his understanding of genuine connection. One afternoon, I was restocking the mini-fridge in his dressing room when he looked up from his guitar. "Leo," he said, "what's the one thing you remember most from any show you've seen?" I thought about it. It's never the biggest fireworks, Mr. Presley. It's usually a moment when you talk to the crowd, or you sing a song a certain way, and it feels like you're singing just to me, or to each person. Elvis nodded slowly. That's it, ain't it? That feeling of being seen, of being connected. He strummed a few soft chords. "Mr. Sterling, he thinks people are impressed by how much money you throw around. He thinks that's how you show power, but power, real power, comes from here." He tapped his chest over his heart. "It comes from giving a piece of yourself." He then looked at me, a thoughtful glint in his eye. What if we gave them something they never expected, something that's not about the usual showmanship, but about something quiet, something deeply personal? I wasn't sure what he meant, but the idea intrigued me. Elvis wasn't one to back down, but he also wouldn't stoop to a vulgar display of wealth to prove a point. His comeback would be subtle, profound. He started having long, quiet conversations with his band leader and his backup singers. They would try out different arrangements of old songs, some that hadn't been in a set list for years. I overheard snippets. Less brass, more strings, focus on the vocal, the emotion. Stripped down almost like a whisper. He was clearly crafting something special. He wasn't adding more lights or bigger costumes. He was taking things away, peeling back the layers to reveal something raw and real. One day I saw him with a stack of old letters. He seemed to be rereading them, his brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't seem sad, just reflective. He was looking for inspiration, for a way to tap into the wellspring of human emotion that was his true gift. Colonel Parker, meanwhile, was still pushing for a more direct response. "Elvis, we need to counter his narrative. The papers are still talking about his donation. We should announce a bigger charity drive. Invite the press to your Graceland mansion. Show off your wealth and generosity." Elvis just shook his head. "Colonel, you don't fight fire with fire when the fire is just smoke and mirrors. You fight it with clean air. You fight it by showing them what's real." He paused, then added, "Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is remind people of the simple truths. And what's simpler than a song from the heart?" He started rehearsing a particular song, one that wasn't a big hit, but a deeper cut from one of his albums. It was a gospel-infused ballad, filled with a yearning for peace and understanding. He sang it differently, with a raw, almost spiritual intensity. His voice wasn't powerful in the usual way. It was imbued with a quiet strength, a gentle vulnerability. He was also spending more time with a group of children from a local orphanage, inviting them to his dress rehearsals, talking to them, listening to their simple stories and dreams. He seemed to draw strength from their innocence, from their pure, uncomplicated joy in his presence. It clicked for me then. Elvis wasn't planning a show of strength. He was planning a show of heart. He wasn't going to try and outspend Mr. Sterling. He was going to remind everyone what money couldn't buy. He was going to expose the hollowness of Sterling's grandiosity by demonstrating the immeasurable value of genuine human connection and simple, profound beauty. He was going to make his comeback, not with a roar, but with a whisper. A whisper that would echo louder than any shout, reaching into the deepest parts of people's souls. The stage was set for a truly masterful moment, one that only the king with his unparalleled understanding of the human heart could deliver. The showroom crackled with an unusual energy on the night of Elvis's big comeback. It wasn't just excitement. It was anticipation. Everyone knew something was different. The rumors of Mr. Sterling's continued attempts to upstage Elvis, combined with Elvis's uncharacteristic quietness, had built a silent crescendo of expectation. Mr. Sterling, of course, was in his front row seat. He had outdone himself tonight, wearing a diamond-studded tuxedo that practically glowed under the house lights. He looked around with an air of self-importance, as if silently daring Elvis to react, to acknowledge his superiority. Probably expected a fiery retort, an angry song, or even a direct verbal jab from the stage. The band struck up the familiar intro music, and then Elvis appeared. He looked magnificent, radiant in a black jumpsuit, shimmering under the lights. The roar of the crowd was deafening, a wave of pure love and adoration. He moved with his usual grace, singing "C.C. Rider" and "Burning Love" with all the energy and passion the audience expected. He threw out scarves, high-fived fans, and flashed those captivating smiles. Everything seemed normal, yet there was an underlying current, a subtle tension in the air. Mid-show, during a lull, after a particularly energetic rock and roll number, The stage lights softened. The band transitioned into a quieter, more reflective melody. Elvis stood still in the center of the stage, microphone in hand. The usual chatter in the audience died down, replaced by a quiet hum of curiosity. "You know," Elvis drawled, his voice softer than usual, "sometimes folks get caught up in all the glitter in the show, they forget what really matters." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the audience, his eyes settling for a moment, it seemed, on Mr. Sterling, though he gave no direct acknowledgement. "We come here," he continued, "to share something special, something from the heart, something that money can't buy, and time can't take away." He then said, "Tonight, I want to sing a song for all of you who believe in the simple things. For those who know that true richness ain't in what you own, but in who you are and who you love." The band began the intro to an old gospel hymn, "Peace in the Valley." It wasn't a typical Elvis showstopper. It was a deeply spiritual, almost melancholic song, usually reserved for more intimate settings. The audience seemed surprised, but a hush fell over the room. As Elvis began to sing, his voice was pure and tender, stripped of all rock and roll swagger. He sang it with an aching sincerity, every word imbued with profound emotion. Closed his eyes for a moment as if truly feeling every lyric. He moved across the stage slowly, not throwing scarves, but simply extending his hand in a gesture of offering. His eyes, when open, seemed to look into the very souls of the audience members. It was a performance of raw vulnerability, of deep faith, of quiet strength. And then something truly unexpected happened. As he sang the verse about "No sadness, no sorrow, no trouble, I'll see," a small group of children, perhaps 10 or 12 of them, slowly walked onto the stage from the wings. They were the orphans he had been spending time with, dressed in their simple, clean clothes. They didn't stand in front of him, but gathered quietly behind him, some holding hands, just looking out at the vast audience with wide, innocent eyes. Elvis didn't acknowledge them directly with words. He simply continued to sing, his voice now even more infused with tenderness, as if he was singing a lullaby directly to them, and through them, to everyone in the room. He moved closer to them, placing a gentle hand on one little boy's shoulder as he sang. The sight of the king, this larger-than-life superstar, sharing the stage with these quiet, unassuming children, singing a hymn about peace and hope, was breathtaking. It was a profound statement without a single spoken word. It was the tableau of humility, compassion, and genuine love. The audience was mesmerized. It wasn't a show of wealth or power. It was a show of pure, unadulterated heart. It countered Mr. Sterling's entire philosophy of money buys everything, with a simple, undeniable truth that the most precious things in life are given freely, through kindness, empathy, and genuine connection. Mr. Sterling, in his gleaming suit, sat frozen in his seat. His smug expression had vanished, replaced by something akin to shock, then a slow creeping discomfort. He was witnessing a power he didn't understand, a value system he couldn't manipulate. He had tried to upstage Elvis with money and flash, and Elvis had subtly, masterfully upstaged him with love and truth. The song ended and the showroom was silent for a full, long moment. Then a wave of applause, not just enthusiastic but deeply reverent, broke through. People weren't just clapping. They were roaring with emotion. It was the sound of hearts melting, just as I had described to Elvis. King had delivered his comeback, and it was a masterpiece of quiet, overwhelming grace. The ovation that followed Peace in the Valley was unlike any I had ever heard. It wasn't just loud, it was an emotional outpouring. People were on their feet, tears streaming down their faces. They weren't just applauding a performance, they were acknowledging a profound moment of shared humanity. The air in the showroom thrummed with a sense of wonder and connection. Elvis stood on stage, still surrounded by the silent children, his hand resting gently on one small head. He just looked out at the audience, a soft, knowing smile on his face, his eyes shining. He didn't speak, he didn't need to. The message had been delivered clear as a bell, without a single word of direct confrontation. After a long, powerful moment, Elvis simply gave a slight bow, and then, with the children still accompanying him, quietly walked off stage. The applause continued, a thunderous echo of the pure emotion he had evoked. I watched Mr. Sterling from my vantage point near the exit. His face, which had been so confident and smug at the start of the show, was now a mask of confusion and, dare I say, deflated ego. He looked utterly bewildered. His diamond-studded tuxedo, which had seemed so impressive earlier, now looked garish, almost ridiculous against the backdrop of the genuine, heartfelt moment he had just witnessed. He seemed to shrink in his seat. He stood up slowly, looking lost, and quietly, almost stealthily, began to make his way towards the exit, not waiting for the end of the show. He wasn't waving to anyone, not exchanging loud pleasantries. He just wanted to disappear. He had tried to buy the spotlight, and Elvis had shown him that some lights burn brighter, not because of their wattage, but because of their source, the human heart. The next day, the newspapers were filled with stories, but not about Mr. Sterling's art museum donation. The headlines screamed about Elvis's angelic moment, the King's heartfelt hymn, and Presley's quiet message of peace. Photographers had captured the image of Elvis with the children, and it quickly became an iconic photo circulating across the nation. There was no mention of Sterling's party, no focus on his wealth. Elvis had completely rewritten the narrative, not by fighting fire with fire, but by dousing it with a gentle, loving rain. Backstage, the atmosphere was one of quiet triumph. Colonel Parker was beaming, though still trying to maintain his gruff exterior. "Well, Elvis," he said, slapping him on the back, "you certainly showed that highfalutin Sterling. What for? Didn't need to lift a finger, did you?" Elvis just chuckled. "Wasn't about showing him what for, Colonel. It was about showing folks what's real, that's all." He was tired, but there was a deep sense of peace about him. He didn't seem to revel in Sterling's defeat, but in the success of the moment he had created the connection he had forged. He spent time with the children, thanking them, giving them hugs, making sure they had a good meal. I watched him from a distance, feeling a surge of admiration. He wasn't just a performer, he was a teacher. He had taught me and everyone in that room a profound lesson. Without saying it directly, he showed that true power wasn't about domination or accumulation, but about connection and generosity of spirit. As Mr. Sterling had scurried out, I had felt a strange mix of pity and satisfaction. He had tried so hard to be the biggest, the flashiest, the wealthiest, but he had missed the point entirely. He had confused notoriety with reverence and extravagance with impact. When I saw Elvis later that night, signing autographs for a few lingering fans, his face was serene. He was just Elvis, a man connecting with people, sharing his gift. The difference between him and Sterling was stark. Sterling radiated a cold, brittle ambition, constantly trying to prove something. Elvis simply radiated warmth, authenticity, and an undeniable humble majesty. The king had not engaged in a war of dollars or boasts. He had waged a battle of souls, and with a simple song and a pure heart he had won, forever solidifying his reign, not just as a music legend, but as a man who understood the true currency of life. Quiet moment Elvis created on stage resonated far beyond the walls of the International Hotel, became a legendary story in Las Vegas, whispered and retold for years. Mr. Sterling, for all his money and his attempts at grandeur, simply faded into the background. His parties never quite rivaled the allure of Elvis's shows. His grand donations, while still financially significant, were forever tainted by the public's perception of his underlying motives. He was seen as a man who bought his way in, not someone who earned his place. He eventually stopped coming to Elvis's shows, perhaps finally understanding that the spotlight he craved was simply not for sale. Elvis, meanwhile, continued his reign as the undisputed king of Vegas. His connection with his audience only deepened. That single, unassuming performance of Peace in the Valley with the children became a touchstone, a reminder of the raw, authentic heart that beat beneath the rhinestones and the rock and roll. It proved that his power wasn't just in his voice or his moves, but in his profound ability to touch people's souls. I continued working at the International for a few more years, watching Elvis perform. Always remembering that night, it taught me a lot about life. I saw how true greatness wasn't about trying to be bigger or louder than everyone else. It was about being genuine, about sharing your gifts, and about truly connecting with others on a human level. Elvis never directly spoke about Mr. Sterling again. He didn't need to. His actions had spoken volumes. He had shown that generosity of spirit, humility, and the pure, unadulterated power of art would always triumph over crude displays of wealth and ego. He taught us that a masterful comeback wasn't about winning an argument, but about changing the game entirely. It wasn't about proving someone else wrong, but about proving yourself true. Looking back, I realized that night was more than just a memorable concert. It was a masterclass in character. Elvis Presley, the biggest star in the world, could have reacted with anger, with a show of his own immense wealth. Instead, he chose grace. He chose authenticity. He chose love. And that perhaps was the most profound secret of his lasting legacy. He wasn't just the king of rock and roll. He was the king of hearts. He understood that while money could buy a lot of things, it could never buy the kind of genuine connection, the kind of soul-stirring magic that only comes from deep within. Years later, when Elvis was gone, his music continued to live, on his legend growing stronger with each passing generation. People remembered his voice, his charisma, his incredible energy. But for those of us who were there, who saw him quietly, subtly, masterfully put Mr. Sterling in his place, we remembered something more. We remembered the heart, the humility, and the profound truth that only the king could lay bare. His stage might have been in the glittering heart of Las Vegas, but his true throne was always in the hearts of his fans. And that was a kingdom no high roller, no matter how rich, could ever hope to conquer. It was a kingdom built on love, and it would last forever.